Chapter 5 Manaus. Sitting down on a plane for 22 hours was guaranteed to not do any good, but Dazai had severely underestimated the extent of pain it caused. Sitting down for 22 hours? He had thought ignorantly. I've laid in bed for far longer than that. How bad could it be? It turned out the answer was very bad. All of him ached, and he never wanted to relive the moment when he finally stood up to stretch and all of his bones cracked like a glow stick. The worst thing about it was that despite the sleep that he got on the plane, he was still exhausted. With every step he walked, all Dazai could think about was how he couldn't wait to find a bed. At least he appreciated the stretch the walk around Manaus gave his unused limbs. Every house here had something distinctive and colorful about it, like the owners had taken on the properties of the exotic birds that lived alongside them. The rainforest had influenced everything. Despite yet not seeing the Amazon River that the city was famed for, he could tell that the Amazon was here in spirit, inhabiting every building and person around them. Dazai didn't mind that he hadn't seen it yet. He had only been here for an hour or so, after all. There was always time. The rainforest would be there tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. Shit, maybe Dazai could even convince Chuuya to go on one of those wilderness expeditions with him. Chuuya dragged Dazai into a shaded building off the main street. Tiredly, Dazai tried to listen into the conversation he had with the woman inside. He caught the words bed and two, but that was pretty much it. Despite challenging Chuuya to learn more Portuguese than him, Chuuya had actually taken it seriously. To be fair to him, Dazai had taken it seriously. He'd learnt the numbers, until he realized that there were much better uses of language. He had learnt 3 very important phrases. Sorry, I don't speak Portuguese. Fuck off, that's my short ginger. And nice argument, but unfortunately I did your mother. Really all he needed to know. Luckily, Chuuya managed to secure them a bunk bed in a hotel, Dazai immediately claiming the bottom bunk as his own and flopping down. Chuuya would be fine with the top, he reasoned. There's no chance of him falling off anyway. And that was the last coherent thought he had before he fell asleep for the next 8 hours. When he awoke, sunlight was streaming through the open window, but now the clock read 17:39, and Chuuya was nowhere in sight, while a young Brazilian man lounged on one of the other bunks, reading a book. The man seemed to have noticed that Dazai had woken up, and said something that sounded like a greeting. Hoping the man had said good morning, and not something like, "You look like your mother was a tree frog," Dazai smiled back and nodded. He wondered vaguely where Chuuya had gotten to this time. He did not have to wonder long, as 5 minutes later, Chuuya burst back into the room. The man on the other bunk greeted him too, with the same cheery tone he had used with Dazai before. Chuuya waved back before turning to Dazai. "Right, so we don't have all that much money left unless you've gotten some hidden away somewhere, but we have enough to last us a week or so." Dazai gasped. "Hat rack, this is going to be so fun!" "Don't fucking call me that! What's so fun about running out of money, dickhead?" No, not that part. Think about it. We're in a whole new city, no reputation, no one knows us, nothing. This is a perfect time for Operation Herons on a winter's evening. Chuuya raised a disbelieving eyebrow. "Come on, you know that's mostly based on luck. I ain't having you wasting what's left of our money if it doesn't work." "Come on, Chuuya. Have a little faith in me. I'll just take half the money if it makes Chibi feel better. And it has worked before." "Yeah, once. And it'll work this time too. Technically, we aren't doing anything wrong. People know the risks, and I've been practicing. But it's your choice. Either we spend the night out in the town, or we do a week or 2 of hard labor." Chuuya sighed. "I don't really have a choice, do I? Fine. Let's do fucking herons on a winter's evening, but shower first. You're starting to smell like a mackerel as well as looking like one." Grinning, Dazai put his thumbs up in confirmation. Tonight would be a fun night. As dusk fell, he and Chuuya wandered through the streets of Manaus. Chuuya, much to Dazai's despair, had donned his fancy hat, making them stand out even more on top of being obvious foreigners. It wasn't really like they had to worry. If anyone tried to jump them, it was not them who would end up in a hospital. But Dazai would still rather the hat remained out of his sight for the rest of his life. Even though it was night, it didn't really feel dark. Lights emitted out of the windows of homes, bars, restaurants, lighting up every street. They roamed around the city, not even pausing to glance into the shadowy alleys, entirely focused on their mission. After some time wandering around, Dazai and Chuuya found what they were looking for. Chuuya slipped into the bar first, discreetly signaling to Dazai that this was the place. Easily arranging his face into a nonchalant grin, he waltzed into the bar, lazily scanning the room. There were a few girls at the counter, chatting in rapid Portuguese with the bartender. A lonely old man in the corner, nursing a glass of something that looked strong, and 3 guys playing a card game at one of the tables. Perfect. He let his gaze linger on the men playing cards before ordering himself a drink. He heard a shout in his general direction. He looked around, making his face surprised. The 3 men were beckoning him over. He nervously pointed to himself, and they nodded vigorously. They said something to him, which he presumed was, "Would you like to play?" However, he had already stepped into his role of nervous and out-of-his-depth traveler, and he knew that he couldn't give himself away this early on. He gave them a shaky rendition of the "Sorry, I don't speak Portuguese" that he had learned on the plane. The men waved him off, then asking if he knew how to play, gesturing to the cards. Dazai hesitated, then shook his head. The men began to explain the rules of what Dazai was pretty sure was blackjack, clearly already too tipsy to remember he couldn't speak Portuguese. Discreetly, he glanced back at where Chuuya was at the bar. The 2 girls seemed to have pounced on him, admiring his air and trying to help him with his broken Portuguese. Dazai didn't know if Chuuya had perfected the role of inconspicuous guard in case things went south, or the girls were just friendly. Laughing inwardly, Dazai quickly looked back to the men before he was caught staring. The cards were dealt, bets placed in, and Dazai let himself lose a few times. After all, he was supposed to be a novice, and losing gave him the time to learn the men's faces, reactions, and tactics. He needed to lose a little before he could win big. The man in the middle dealt again. Dazai pushed a little more of his money in than usual. All the men raised an eyebrow in judgment. He kept his face in an easy smile. Despite the higher raise, they all pushed money in. Looking around the circle, Dazai knew there was a good spread of players. The first one, a short, scruffy man, was quick to fold and only betted high when he had a 21. The second, a man with a rosary hung around his neck, would never fold. The third was the only slightly competent one. He actually changed his tactics sometimes. Still, no matter how good he was, he couldn't beat Dazai. Dazai drew a card, placing another slightly higher than average bet in. All 3 men matched. When Dazai placed in 5 more coins, the man who chickened out earlier folded. Good. The only man who would have beaten him. He didn't let the satisfaction of his plans all going perfectly show on his face. The 3 of them who remained turned over their cards, Dazai happily taking all of the winnings for himself. He continued this, easy smile stuck firmly on his face for the next few rounds. He won every single one. Pleased to see the only smart man's tactics were easily influenced by the growing rage he felt as Dazai won every single game. At last, Dazai hit the jackpot. He picked up his 2 cards, a 2 and a 3. If his next cards would be low too, if everyone played as he predicted them to, the small man had a jackpot and was sure to bet high, matching all of Dazai's high bets. The second man only had a 19, but also the guts to think that he could win like that. He had been eyeing Dazai's growing pile of cash for a while. He would think the risk was worth it. The third man only 12, but would draw after Dazai and get a 9, shooting him up to 21. All 3 would match whatever bets Dazai threw at them. He started off easy, but they raised the bets all by themselves. Dazai matched. They drew cards. He breathed a sigh of relief, seeing the 5 he predicted. He was at 10. He raised the bet, everyone eagerly matching. He drew again, 4. All the men smirked, hoping to get the best of him, and placing more money into the quite frankly extortionate pile. Dazai kept an easy smile, drawing again. A 2. Bingo. He looked up at the men, smirking. 5 cards without going over 21. No matter what the other player's cards were, he automatically won. He turned his cards around to show him his hand, quickly taking the money off the table while they were too stunned to move. He stood up. Obrigado, he thanked them cheerfully, making his way out of the bar quickly. He saw Chuuya hurriedly separate himself from the fawning women hot on his heels. There was an enraged shout, the men busting out of the bar. Dazai looked at Chuuya, grinning manically. "Oh dear," he said calmly. "Looks like it's time to run." Chuuya rolled his eyes before breaking into a sprint with Dazai. They ran down the twists and turns of Manaus' streets, quickly losing the men in the maze-like city. When they were sure they had escaped, they paused to catch their breath and count the money. "Have fun, Chuuya," Dazai teased, trying not to let the jealousy show through in his tone. Chuuya rolled his eyes. "Those girls just kept trying to do my hair. I don't really know. I didn't understand them." Chuuya had clearly caught the jealousy behind Dazai's question, but Dazai was surprised to find he didn't really mind. Maybe he was used to Chuuya looking through all his facades after all this time together. "How the fuck do you win every time?" "That's a secret, mon petit chibi," Dazai replied, reaching over to boop Chuuya's nose as he did so. Chuuya scowled. "Cut the crap and get your hands out of my fucking face." "That's not a very nice thing to say to the person who just earned us dinner for the next month. Would you rather I put my hand in other places?" Dazai wiggled his eyebrows at Chuuya, who promptly went red. "Cute." Chuuya glared at him even more. Fine, fine. If you must know, I count the cards." Chuuya sighed, pink still lingering on his cheeks. "Of course you do. I don't know what I expected." He started walking down the pavement again, Dazai trailing after him. "Where to next?" Dazai shrugged. The night had so many possibilities. It was wonderful. The streets were full of people now, all out to have a good time. Maybe Dazai would even end up winning some of their money tonight. Oh, I don't know. Somewhere more up class. We've got big winnings to earn. And Chuuya? Can I get a kiss for good luck? Chuuya sputtered, and Dazai watched gleefully as his blush returned. He wished he could capture the moment and frame it forever. His insides felt all mixed up and fuzzy in a way that was incredibly out of place, but something Dazai had found himself growing accustomed to. Oh well, he supposed he would just have to keep making Chuuya blush. "You can get a punch to the face, take it or leave it." The night was spent just like that, with Dazai donning new personalities and Chuuya keeping watch. One moment he was an airheaded foreigner, and the next he was the mysterious man who didn't talk much. Either way, he ended up winning big, infuriating his opponents and exasperating Chuuya. It was fun. Every new place was a new stage, ready for Dazai to put on a new performance. He had time to be anyone but himself. As he and Chuuya made their way back to their hotel, Chuuya slightly tipsy from the drinks they'd bought in celebration of their night's earnings, the thought that this, the personality he had now, was just another of his easily switched facades. He could be anything, anyone he wanted, but who was he when he tried not to act anymore? He still found himself making himself smile when he knew he should, making himself laugh when he should, making himself do just about everything because he should. Because that's what people expect. You smile when you're happy, you cry when you're sad. You frown when you're confused. But too often, Dazai found himself arranging these expressions on his face on purpose, because that's what he wanted the world to see. Because that's what he should look like. So he made himself look like that. He frowned. It seemed so natural when he wasn't aware of it, to just slide his personality on like well-worn clothes. But now he was aware. It seemed repulsive that he ever used it again. Let them see who he really is. Let them slide off the perfect personality and see the misery that festers beneath. Let them look at him, lying soulless on the floor, and see who he really is. Let them see, he thought bitterly. Let them see and regret every time they ever told me to just be myself. There was no use to being himself. No one wanted to see that. No one wanted to see how a pathetic human could really get. So he covered it all up into something that was more, well, acceptable. Despite dreading the idea of acting the thing people called Dazai, he still found himself arranging his face into a gentle smile, because that's what people did when they had a good day. He needed to fit in among the humans he was masquerading as, after all. Truth be told, it had been a good day, despite the creeping doubt that Dazai could be anyone he wanted to be, and yet was still no one at all. It was so different to the good days he had in the Port Mafia. The good days in the Port Mafia were when he had consciously allowed the fake personality he had so crafted to completely take over. He was like an android, speaking when spoken to, answering with built-in responses. It allowed the actual Dazai to take a seat far back in his mind as possible, entirely removed from his own life and watching everything as if it was on a screen. Immersive, intriguing, like a movie. Yet, there was no controlling what the character of Dazai did next other than following the built-in commands. At least like that, it didn't hurt. At least like that, his brain would be quiet just for 1 minute, allowing him respite from his endless torrent of thoughts. If being himself was what Dazai had to sacrifice for a moment of peace, he would gladly do so. It was funny. What he considered a good day in the Port Mafia wouldn't really be considered a good day at all right now. Maybe not necessarily a bad day. Bad days were reserved for when the drop from his hotel room balcony was just a little too tempting, or he wanted to hole up in whatever bed he had and just not. His own bed would be better than a hotel bed, but he didn't exactly have a bed to return to right now, so a hotel bed would do. He'd let the covers protect him from the outside world, like he was a child hiding from monsters, and just stay still until he could no longer tell where his arms ended and the sheets began. However, tonight was not the time for that. The night was hardly young, but in a place like Manaus, it didn't seem to matter. The nightlife was thriving in this city, in the heart of the Amazon, and Dazai wasn't going to waste a vibrant night like this, reminiscing about worse times. He made his face into a smile, hoping at some point that it would become genuine. Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't, but he didn't remember the last time he smiled without meaning to. Although, maybe it was a bit like breathing. You aren't aware you're doing it until you think about it, and then you're doing it manually. He didn't know about human things like that. He turned to Chuuya, quickly grabbing him by the arm before he walked straight into a puddle. He probably would have been fine. His boots were waterproof, but that wasn't the point. Chuuya could have gotten splashed, and they might need to wash off his shoes, and they would have very limited places to do laundry, and it was not because Dazai liked the feeling of Chuuya's arm linked with his. He pushed all of those thoughts out of his treacherous mind. "I think we've gotten enough to last us for a good while now, Chibi," he exclaimed cheerfully. "Do you want to go home, or on to the next bar?" "The fuck do you think, bastard?" Chuuya asked, his tone lacking its usual anger. "On to the next bar. We'll have the party of our motherfucking lives." Dazai laughed, letting Chuuya grab his hand and run down the street. Never had running felt so freeing. Like every problem was on a different plane of existence entirely, and tonight was for them and them only. He ran as fast as he could, and for once it felt like they were running together, instead of Dazai being dragged along. Dragging him into the bar with luminous red lights bathing the entire place, Chuuya eagerly dragged him over to the bar. "Go on then, gambler. Buy me a drink." "The Chibi is such a demanding date," Dazai whined, despite waving the bartender over. "It's not a fucking date." "Oh, really? Then why am I buying you drinks?" Dazai teased. "Because you have all our money. How are you the demon prodigy again?" Such people as small-minded as you could never understand. "Call me stupid one more time and I'll fucking strangle you." "I don't like pain very much, but if Chuuya's doing it..." Dazai trailed off, wiggling his eyebrows at Chuuya. He watched in satisfaction as his face went bright red, barely visible under the bar lights. But Dazai could tell. Even the top of Chuuya's ears were red. How cute. Under the glowing lights of the bar, they partied through the night. Even stumbling back to their hotel and watching Chuuya float himself up onto his bed just felt like another part of their incredibly long, chaotic adventure. The bad moments, not that there were many, like when he had nearly been caught by an angry gambler, all felt part of the night. Dazai wanted to remember it all, because the good bits were too good to forget, and the bad bits would make them seem real. A few days later, Dazai managed to convince Chuuya to go out into the wilderness with him. Although, Chuuya insisted that they go with a tour group. Dazai had complained that they would look like tourists, until Chuuya reminded him that they were. In the end, Dazai couldn't complain. They spent 4 days in the depths of the rainforest, exotic birds and chirping animals singing them to sleep every night. During the day, they would spend their time surrounded by towering trees, reaching up further than Dazai had ever seen. He wondered what the view would look like from the very top, looking out over the carpet of green leaves that acted like the rainforest's roof so far above his head. They saw snakes thicker than Dazai's legs wound around trees, their geometrically arranged scales making them look like another piece of the foliage. Dazai quite liked the snakes. They had a sharp, intriguing look in their eyes. There was also the day they spent on the banks of the river, although to simply call it a river was an understatement. It would be like looking at a lake and calling it a puddle. They watched the river as dolphins passed by, Chuuya fondly making fun of their odd-looking heads. They looked like someone had a vague idea of what a dolphin was supposed to look like, and then was told to make one. They were silly-looking creatures, and Dazai had a special place in his heart for them. They made Chuuya laugh so beautifully. Chuuya claimed he could beat the alligators he saw in a fight, and Dazai didn't doubt it. Every night, they would fend greedy monkeys away from their food, and Dazai wondered why he ever thought they were just funny little creatures. They were fiends. Sadly, their escapade into the wilderness ended, and their return to Manaus, which was a wilderness all in its own right. A new hotel, a new part of the city, somewhere entirely new to explore. Despite all the sights and colors, Dazai couldn't help but looking at the only thing that wasn't new, Chuuya. The long days in the sun had brought out hidden freckles that splattered his cheeks, and Dazai wished he could count every single one. When he was younger, he had been told a story about people with freckles. It said that angels had kissed their cheeks and left their marks, and Dazai couldn't think of anyone quite more angelic than Chuuya. Even in his plain vest and his grass-stained cargo trousers, Dazai doubted there was anyone who could look as stunning as Chuuya. They had been in Manaus for a week, their initial night of terrorizing locals forgotten. They lay on top of their hotel roof, having climbed up there while meticulously evading their hostess. They could see the rushing river over the many rooftops, the bustling of the street only just reaching up to them, voices nothing but faint murmurs. Stars twinkled in the sky above them, with the sky reflecting on the water of the river, dyeing it pitch black. It reminded Dazai of the night, months ago, where he had been sitting on the Yokohama dock, staring out at a sky just like this one. If the stars had changed positions, he couldn't tell. To him, it was the same stars, the same sky looking down on him. Dazai looked over at Chuuya, who was frowning, staring off into space. He frowned slightly more, opened his mouth like he was about to say something, then shut it again. Dazai looked away, back to the river. Chuuya could have whatever argument he was having with his thoughts without Dazai prying to watch. If he wanted to say something, Dazai would give him the time. There were a few minutes of blissful silence where Dazai looked over the sea of buildings, gentle wind blowing through the warm air. Chuuya grumbled. To Dazai's surprise, he had then held out his hand, pointedly looking anywhere but Dazai. Dazai stared at Chuuya's outstretched hand. What was he supposed to do? Did Chuuya want him to give him something? Dazai knew he hadn't forgotten to give Chuuya anything. He only ever forgot when he wanted to be annoying. He glanced quickly between Chuuya's hand and his turned-away face. Oh, Chuuya was blushing. Suddenly, all the pieces clicked into place inside Dazai's mind. He smirked at Chuuya. Are you asking me to hold your hand? Chuuya went even redder. Just shut the fuck up. So you don't want me to hold your hand? Dazai teased. No, Chuuya sighed. Just take my fucking hand, Dazai. Dazai did so, not really understanding why this was happening, but he wasn't exactly about to complain. His and Chuuya's fingers still fit together perfectly, and he relished the warmth that came with it. Maybe he had fallen asleep without realizing it, and now was having a strangely realistic yet out-of-character dream. If this was a dream, he hoped he never woke up. He didn't think he could bear it if, in only a second, he opened his eyes to find himself in bed, all of this moment a figment of his overactive imagination. May I ask why I'm holding your hand? Dazai asked, feeling the need to add, not that I mind. No, Chuuya replied bluntly. They sat in silence for a few moments, Dazai knowing that if he was quiet for long enough, Chuuya would tell him anyway. Maybe he could even have a guess as to what the reason was. He did have a faint idea already, but it was much more fun to have Chuuya tell him outright. Chuuya sighed. Arahabaki was being particularly loud. You shut him up, you know. Dazai cataloged that information away for further use. I thought so. You thought so? Then why did you ask the question, dickhead? Because it's funner to see Chuuya go all red. Dazai laughed, making Chuuya go even more red and turn his face away. Oh, don't hide, Chibi. Dazai reached out his spare hand, putting it gently under Chuuya's chin and turning its face back towards him. "You're cute when you blush." "I'm not fucking cute," Chuuya replied, his voice too soft to be venomous. Humming, Dazai ran his thumb across Chuuya's jaw. He wasn't quite sure what possessed him to do that. Maybe if this was a dream, he could do whatever he wanted. Maybe it was like how people ran their fingers over soft fabrics. Touching just makes them even prettier. As if snapped out of a trance, he pulled his hand away, suddenly aware of how close they were. Chuuya's hand was hot in his, a grounding weight. Suddenly, Chuuya looked like something untouchable, otherworldly. Something Dazai didn't quite deserve. Is Harahabaki mad that he'll probably never get used again? Dazai joked, trying to move away from whatever possessed him to run his hand over Chuuya's face like that. He would be lying if he said he was happy to let go, but he had to get a grip. Arahabaki's always mad, Chuuya answered easily. I don't think he'll miss the Port Mafia more than any other place. Although, most surprising thing about leaving is discovering that you have another eye. Dazai laughed. You never know, it could be very convincingly fake. Smiling, Chuuya shook his head. Don't try that bullshit on me. Both of your pupils are blown equally wide right now. Accepting defeat, Dazai looked back at the scene spread out in front of him. It didn't quite look as wonderful now that he'd seen Chuuya's face close up. Like how eating nice cake didn't quite seem so nice after having a bite of the nicest cake there was. The lights didn't sparkle quite so brightly now that he'd seen them reflected in Chuuya's eyes. You know, Chuuya started, his voice hesitant and quiet. Sometimes I get the feeling, when I'm in a crowd of people, that I'll never be able to fit in. I look around and know I'm just fundamentally different. I've got a god in my head, a list of crimes about 50 meters long, and no matter what, you'll never be human like them. No matter how hard you try, Dazai finished. The statement hung in the night air, hovering between them. Dazai didn't think he had admitted that out loud to anyone before, and even if it didn't sound like an admittance, he knew Chuuya would see it for what it was. You know, I've always found it funny how your ability is called no longer human, and here you are, making me feel more human than anything else. Dazai's breath caught in his throat. It's called no longer human for a reason, Chuuya. If you think I'm anything but that, you're utterly fucking delusional. It's true, even now, outside of the Port Mafia, he couldn't find anything about him that was completely human. Everything that looked human from the outside was a carefully put together act, and everything else didn't even look human at all. He had heard people wax poetic about a million different emotions in a million different ways, and still, he could never think of a time he'd felt one of them as they had been described. Anything that could be considered happiness was tainted with sorrow. Anything that could be fear was washed away until it was nothing. Is that why you want to die so much? Chuuya's eyes seemed to pierce a hole in Dazai's soul. What? He asked, surprised. Is that why you want to die so much? I mean, I'm literally not human, and sometimes... Chuuya took a deep breath. Sometimes I activate corruption, and I can't help but think that if you didn't get there in time, if you didn't stop me, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Chuuya. Dazai felt a rush of understanding, reaching out to try to touch Chuuya. His fingers fell just short and lingered over his shoulder. Chuuya smiled sadly. I'm not quite something that belongs in this world, Dazai. Don't pretend like it's true. Silently, Dazai squeezed Chuuya's hand. So why do you keep living? He asked quietly, a mimicry of the question Chuuya directed at him. Chuuya smirked. Spite. Spite? Hell yeah! He grinned, and Dazai felt like he'd been struck through the heart. Even here, even now, Chuuya managed to take Dazai's breath away. I've been fighting as long as I can remember, and if you think all those people who want me dead are going to get what they want, you've gone mad. I want all those people who tried to kill me to never be satisfied. There was something victorious in Chuuya's smile, and Dazai knew that he should feel jealous that Chuuya had something to live for. He should resent Chuuya for having what he could never quite reach. He should be, but he wasn't. He could never be angry that someone as precious as Chuuya had found something to live for, even if he hadn't. But he didn't. He knew it was one of the most inhuman things about him, and he was mostly glad that Chuuya didn't have to experience it. Chuuya clicked his tongue. You're avoiding the question, though. Why do you want to die so much, if you don't mind me asking? Looking out over the rooftops, Dazai took a breath. I guess he didn't know why he was even telling Chuuya this. He didn't know why the parts of him he had so desperately tried to keep hidden away just came tumbling out when Chuuya was around. I guess I've just felt so out of place my entire life. Maybe the only place I would feel at home would be death. I don't know. Mostly it just hurts. It hurts so much, and it won't go away. I just want it to stop hurting. Chuuya was silent, wrapping his arms around Dazai. Dazai buried his head in Chuuya's hair, willing himself to focus on how nice it smelled, instead of the burning in his throat. He hadn't cried for years. He wouldn't start now. When Chuuya spoke, it was barely a whisper. Something that could be whisked away by the slightest breeze. What is being human anyway? Boom! Title of the fic. What is being human anyway? Haha. I liked their whole gambling scene. That was like my favorite bit. Also, fun fact, I have a Discord if y'all want to join. It's in the description. And I don't know, I couldn't find I only found one other bungostraydogs Discord server, like a really good one. And I couldn't find any more, so I just made my own. So here we go.